This is John Batchelor, and I welcome my guests and colleagues, Judy Dempsey, the senior scholar for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Judy's in Berlin, and Thadeus McCotter of American Greatness, former member of Congress from the... I hear you fine, Judy. From the state of Michigan, Livonia is in a suburb of Detroit. Lady and gentlemen, I welcome you this morning. Judy, we're here when you join the picture. I'm going to turn to the headlines because they're spectacular, and we can address immediately the most pressing matter for Europe, which is Greenland. The headlines in the FT, this is London reporting, spectacular. Dollar falls sharply and Wall Street stocks set for losses over Greenland crisis. The observation in many parts of op-eds, but I'll continue with the spectacular headlines. For example, Russia knocks out Kyiv's power, heating, and water. Apparently, in the coldest winter of the war so far, Greenland, Kyiv is without resources and is urging its partners in Europe to help immediately. But that doesn't look to be any warmth for the people of Kyiv and the rest of the cities. It's a campaign to knock out the energy infrastructure, and it's succeeding. We also have news that the London United Kingdom Foreign Office has approved China building a mega embassy in London, despite the news the other day that there was a secret room at the bottom of it, with no explanation for when we would know what was in the secret room. In terms of the United Kingdom, there's a procedural vote in these next hours in Parliament having to do with the ambition of the Starmer government to bring on the debate over Chagos Islands, which are being turned over to the Mauritius Islands in some fashion. This has a great concern for security matters, because the Chagos Islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean contain the island of Diego Garcia, which is the forward base for U.S. and its allies in the event of air power needed in Eurasia. Domestically, we have a story which continues to be tariffs, and there's great anxiety about whether the tariffs are or are not successful in time to persuade the American government to continue its support for Donald Trump. There's reason to believe that the American consumer, who is not apprised day to day about tariff costs, believes that tariffs are part of the inflation story, or part of the cost of living story, or part of the story that elected Donald Trump and is now likely to unelect his majority in the House of Representatives, and there's talk of the Senate as well. So I welcome Judy and Thadeus. I'm going to begin with welcoming Berlin in particular. Judy, a very good day to you. We hear you fine. Thank you very much. And when we see your lovely smile, it's a pleasure. I labeled this program that we've had success with last week, the program of ire, because Mr. McCotter meets Miss Dempsey, a daughter and son of Ireland. We turn to the European headlines, Judy, because it's impossible for me to have programmed Greenland as our lead story, but there it is. So I'd like to begin with a countdown and record this for later. Forgive me. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is John Batchelor with Judy Dempsey of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Berlin, and Thadeus McCotter of American Greatness in a suburb of Detroit. He's in the great state of Michigan. Lady and gentlemen, I begin with a headline that is hard to make up, but there it is. We're talking about the markets around the world reacting to unusual news from Greenland. Dollar falls sharply and Wall Street stocks set for losses over Greenland crisis. The subhead, U.S. President insists, quote, there can be no going back on demand for the island. I'm noting that the big three of the European Union, that's France, Germany, and Italy, and including the UK as an asterisk member of the EU, have all responded bluntly that this is unacceptable. Judy, I come to you because you're seeing the Berlin news. This is Mr. Mertz's voice saying, no, you can't do this. You will not do this, and not disagreeing with the idea that it might break up NATO. How does the German public view this? Are they focusing on it, or are there too many other concerns about the domestic economy? Good day to you, Judy.
Good day, John, and thank you for having me on your show. Well, there's a difference between the public and the politicians. The public is aghast at what is happening. And they have been reminded by the German media that Trump now is in office for nearly a year, and his now attempt to get Greenland coincides with immense worry about what is happening in the United States under the Trump administration.
Judy, I'm going to interrupt you because your sound is a little wobbly for the record.
Okay, hold on.
Yes, take your time. This is the making of the John Batchelor Show. We're not hiding anything.
Fine. I took off my earphones. Sometimes it interferes.
Oh, yes. Now your voice is much stronger. So I will begin with the question again.
Sure.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Batchelor, and I welcome my good colleagues, Judy Dempsey of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She's been in Berlin. And Thadeus McCotter of American Greatness. He's in a suburb of Detroit in the great state of Michigan. We begin with a headline that is hard to make up, but there it is. Dollar falls sharply and Wall Street stocks set for losses over Greenland crisis. What? Subhead, U.S. President insists, quote, there can be no going back on demand for island. I see in other headlines that we're looking at the major powers in the EU and NATO both weighing in on this, finding it unacceptable that the U.S. is moving on a part of the sovereign state of Denmark, a member of NATO. Greenland has been a colony of Denmark for 2 centuries or more. There's a debate as to whether Denmark is adequate for the people of Greenland, but there's no doubt that it's indicated on the map. This is Danish territory, and not loose to be grabbed by any power. Judy, I note that Mr. Merz, along with Mr. Macron, Mr. Starmer, have all voiced their opinion that this is unacceptable conduct by the United States. And there is the suggestion by the Danish Prime Minister that if the United States goes forward with this intention, it will break up NATO. How does the German public regard this, given all the other worries and concerns of these days? Good day to you, Judy.
Good day, John, and thank you for having me on your show. The German public is absolutely astonished and flabbergasted by what President Trump intends to do. And it's not just about NATO or even the possible breakup of NATO. It's what it's doing to the transatlantic alliance, this bedrock of multilateral cooperation since the late 1940s, early 50s. And what they don't understand is, why can't you negotiate to have even a closer relationship with Greenland and Denmark? And as it is, the United States has a presence in Greenland. They have access to certain things. They have a cooperation agreement with Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark. But somehow Trump wants more. And his argument is to keep China and Russia away from Greenland, as if Russia is being kept away from Ukraine. Trump seems to have a very different agenda for Ukraine compared to Greenland. But the German public is absolutely astonished by this, and they are extremely worried because Europe is totally unprepared for this.
Thaddeus, I come to you because we have heard Mr. Trump remark that he's going to punish at least 10 NATO nations for dissenting with an additional tariff of 10%. I believe that's the latest. It might have changed. I mention that only because it seems peculiar that now we're told that the tariffs are a response to the emergency of trade deficits, but suddenly the tariffs are an all-purpose weapon to be used against any dissent whatsoever, anyone not following the president's intentionality. We're waiting for a Supreme Court decision over whether or not the interpretation of trade deficit is an emergency that allows for an act of Congress to go into effect. an act that was from 1977, not permanently written in stone. What is your measure of the American public? Is it paying attention to the Greenland matter, and are the politicians responding in a like fashion? Thank you. Good evening. Good day to you.
Well, I think most Americans are pretty cognizant of the fact that Indiana won the national championship in football last night, 27 to 24, I think. But at the end of the day, Americans are just kind of waiting to see what happens. They're used to we live here, and we have had a Trump administration already. We're in the second Trump administration, and they're used to seeing the president negotiate with very, very sharp elbows. And so we're not particularly, his enemies are very upset. People in the middle are just kind of, this is what we've seen before. And Republicans may think, oh, it's okay. But at the end of the day, I think the word Judy used was flabbergasted, but we're not flabbergasted. But there is some outrage at certain quarters, but there's always going to be. I think at the end of the day, what you're really seeing is a president who doesn't do things the sneaky way that a lot of times you've seen administrations do amongst allies. Remember, we've had allies spy on each other. I think Germany was one of the cases the Obama administration spied on. You don't necessarily do that to your friends. But that's a sneaky way that administrations used to do things. Trump is very upfront, whether you like it or not. You know he wants Greenland. You know he's negotiating for it. And he's just going to bluster his way to see if that's a part of how he can accomplish what he wants to do. I don't think we're going to go to war over Greenland.
Thaddeus, you have a question for Judy.
Judy, does that make sense of how the American people view this to you?
Actually, you triggered off a thought that has been going on in my mind. I can understand exactly what you say. The Americans have seen now Trump administration 2 in action. Actually, so the Europeans. And what is interesting is the sort of psychological way that the Trump administration does things. It's endlessly distracting the media from one crisis to the other, from one idea to the other. And before the media can get a grip on one issue, Trump turns to something else, whether it's the new Council for Gaza, whether it's Greenland, whether it's tariffs, whether it's Venezuela. There's always something, which means that so little really sticks in some ways, even though the Epstein files are still in the background. So, yes, I agree with you. I can understand why the Americans must be saying, gosh, I mean, Greenland, it's closer to the United States compared to Greenland's relationship with Denmark, which is 5,000 kilometers away. But the more the American media land on Greenland, it will become news. But going to war over Greenland, this is something the Europeans certainly don't want, and neither does the administration.
Hey, Judy, do you know how I first learned about Greenland when I was a kid?
No.
I watched the movie A Hard Day's Night. Where they asked John Lennon, how did you find Greenland? He goes, yeah, how'd you find America? I turned left at Greenland.
Yeah, well, it's pretty huge and pretty desolate and pretty cold. And if President
Sounds
Trump,
like Detroit.
Yeah.
I mentioned some trivia about Greenland. One, the McCotter projection makes it appear much larger than the United States of America, when in fact it's a quarter of the size of continental U.S. And two, in 1940, when the Wehrmacht overran Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark, Greenland became a possession of the United States to protect and preserve. It was handed back to Denmark at the end of the war in 1945. And I also mentioned that what we're dealing with here is an intentionality that has always been in place, but heretofore was understood as a partnership. Of course, the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap is a concern. It was a concern during the Cold War, but it never bothered Eisenhower or any of the presidents who followed him in the Cold War enough so they wanted to take possession. I do note that Denmark has deployed military force to Denmark. It's hard to say how many, but the report was special forces seen bringing their paraphernalia into Nuuk, N-U-U-K, which is the capital on the western side of Greenland. I mention all that because we're not going to settle it here. I want to turn to a larger story of the EU these days, given that we have positive news, but we have a confusing picture of the EU in winter. And Judy, is there a way to characterize the mood of the EU with Ukraine, now with Iceland, an additional burden, with the unknown of the markets, which are taking a pounding right now because of the negative news on Greenland? Is there an EU opinion of this wintertime, or is it every man and woman for himself?
Oh, John, if there was an EU opinion, you'd be doing a special show on this. It's very difficult to get any kind of unity in the EU, even with this latest conflict between the United States, Greenland, Denmark, and the European Union. No, it's every member state is looking after itself, looking at the amount of gas supplies they have, relying more and more on US expensive liquefied natural gas. There's very little talk about trying to save energy, but it's a bitterly cold winter. And what is interesting is that especially German television and indeed large parts of the European media are giving quite a lot of attention to Ukraine, where temperatures have slipped to -20. I mean, that's so cold, that's Celsius here. And bitterly cold, and at the same time, President Putin's forces are bombing the infrastructure, the civilian infrastructure, military infrastructure, the capital, Kyiv. Day by day, there's no heating, no water, no sanitation, schools are closed, kids are staying home until at least February. It's a state of emergency. So in some ways, there's an element of Europeans saying, oh gosh, it's very cold here. On the other hand, when you tell them, and I speak to them regularly, and when television, radio says, hang on, look what's happening in Ukraine, it just gets certain things into perspective. Europe is very, very lucky because it has still got, because the infrastructure is just safe and secure.
Thaddeus, you have a question for Judy.
Yes, Judy, in the United States, we've heard that there may be issues regarding Germany's ability to produce energy. And some of it was the talk about the green agenda that the Germans have gone on. Is that discussed? Are you hearing that actually in Germany, or is this more of an American media creation at this point?
I missed the first point, what the Americans were talking about.
Oh, we tend to talk about Germany in the sense that they're regretting some of their move towards green energy.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I'm wondering if that's the actuality that you're experiencing.
Well, they're not regretting it as such. They are certainly delaying it because it costs quite a lot of money. Secondly, it coincides with a kind of deindustrialization, which the German government under Chancellor Friedrich Merz has to deal with. And so green energy kicks into all these kind of issues. However, there is an absolute consensus to speed up renewables, and the renewables really have increased use of renewable energy, special pumps, electric cars are coming on train finally now, but there is support for it. I think one of the downsides is that politicians are afraid to explain the cost, because both dealing with climate issues and the green energy agenda, it costs money, it costs time, and actually people tend to forget households have to be renovated and changed to accommodate the kind of new energy that's coming on stream. And so this demands really open communication by the politicians.
We're going to Germany in specific because there's news about the economy. If the EU doesn't have a general opinion, does Germany have a specific opinion of something that isn't actually negative? Judy Dempsey of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Berlin, Thadeus McCotter in Detroit. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with my good colleagues, Judy Dempsey in Berlin and Thadeus McCotter in Detroit. There was news in these last days of the German economy responding to investment by the government. This, in terms of generality, is called military Keynesianism, pouring government money into a policy that is generally desired. And in this case, it's Germany rearming or arming up or participating in some fashion in the pledges that have been made about NATO and about Ukraine. I read this as positive news, Judy, but that was in English. Is it positive news in German?
Well, any tiny increase is sort of positive news. The problem is that it's not linked to any kind of structural reforms, particularly of the pension system, of the creaking health system, which is completely overburdened because the immense changes in demography and the increasing life expectancy of the older generation. And this is actually eating into the budget. I think 40% of GDP is spent on health and pensions. It's an extraordinary amount of money. And so Chancellor Merz and his conservative Christian Democrats, along with the Social Democrats, have been criticised for not tackling these issues head on. They try to do it every time they're in office, every new coalition comes in. But the public is very disappointed with Chancellor Merz's domestic issues because they do realise, on the one hand, reform is needed, but on the other hand, there's the constituency of the Social Democrats who actually want to pour money into subsidise pensioners even more because 35 or 40% of their voters are pensioners.
And quickly, AFD, does it have an opinion of this investment, military investment?
AFD is just on a roll at the moment because of the military spending, the defence spending, the special conscription compromise that was made. AFD is neck and neck now with the Conservatives. And in the two eastern states of Saxony-Anhalt and Thuringia, they will hold elections later this year. They are actually leading the polls. This is an enormous problem for Chancellor Merz. It's an enormous problem for German democracy and how they're going to deal with this. This is more than a populist party. This is a party that is out to question many of the fundamentals that have kept Germany secure and democratic and liberal over the past 50 or 60 years.
Thadeus, you have a question for Judy.
Yes, Judy, what do you see as the possibilities of the current conservative leadership in addressing AFD? What are some of the options they have to try to blunt the electoral bandwagon they're on?
Yeah, Merz is pushing the issue of controlling irregular migration and irregular asylum seekers. And it's a really good question because nearly every week or every fortnight it's splashed on the newspapers. Oh, illegal migration figures, they're going down. So this is the kind of news that Chancellor Merz wants to hear, and this is the kind of news he wants to say to the AFD. You know, we are actually dealing with immigration. All you do is criticize us. So this is one of the things that Chancellor Merz is trying to do. Of course, with his EU colleagues as well. It's not very pleasant, but he realises that irregular immigration is going to cause even more of a backlash and play into the hands of the AFD. So he's very, very hands-on about dealing with this issue.
China. The trade between Germany and China is a concern, but so is the concern larger and larger about China offsetting its decline of exports to America. I believe the decline was 20%, by an increase of exports into the European Union market. That can be a large negative for Germany. It has been in the past. Is there an understanding of the Bundestag right now about trade with China? Have they come to a decision?
Chancellor Merz is going to do a big visit to China in the coming weeks. As you saw, the Canadian leadership did deemed a very successful visit to China, given what's happening between Canada and the United States over tariffs and political relations and so on. So in terms of the automobile industry, in terms of electric cars, in terms of chemicals and everything, Germany's looking to China again, but trying to make the relationship, if it's at all possible, a little more diversified, a little bit more equal. That's very difficult to do at the moment, but the relationship is getting warmer after a couple of years of rather frosty relations because they realise what's happening with the whole tariff regime and the unpredictability of the United States. And this is what upsets German industry at the moment, the complete unpredictability and the big questions actually their face. Should we invest in the United States and at what level? Or should we actually forge some of different investment rules with China? It's all very, very complicated now because it's so unpredictable on the western side of the transatlantic alliance.
That is, we have about a minute for a quick question.
Quick question, Judy. What specifically do they hope to get out of trade relations with China and Germany?
Access to raw materials.
Quick enough for you, John?
Very quick. Rare earths. And the rare earths are the levers that China's used.
That's right.
What is surprising about the FT report this morning is noting that the imports when the U.S. went down 20%.
That's right.
But the imports in Europe went up, and the supply chain just adapted itself. As opposed to from China to the U.S., it was China to the Southeast Asia to the U.S., or China to Europe and then to the U.S. So Mr. Trump's tariffs managed to have people shake things up, but they shook things up with exactly the same intentionality. China at the beginning of the supply chain. Judy Dempsey of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She's in Berlin. Thadeus McCotter of American Greatness. He's in the great state of Michigan and the suburbs of Detroit. This is the John Batchelor Show in action, dealing with the vagaries of the Trump administration's tariffs waiting on the Supreme Court. I'm John Batchelor. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank
And
you,
Judy, you have a wonderful day in Berlin. I ask about your weather because it's very cold here. How is it with you?
Bitter. And
yes.
the dog only wants to go out for 45 minutes. She's a short-haired collie, so she doesn't have the big thick hairs like the normal collies. So she says, "Bring me home, please."
We are going to 0 Fahrenheit tonight. Are you going that low? I don't know what that is in Celsius.
We went down to -10. What's 10 Celsius? I've lost track. It's very cold.
Yes. Well,
I get my degrees right next week.
There's some comfort to know that we're all cold together. So thank you. Thank you, Judy. We will.
Big pleasure.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you for joining us.
See you next week.
Right.
Bye.
That is, we're going to turn to Japan. The headline this morning from Japan is that I'm going to send to our guest in Japan while I'm telling you what I'm concerned is that the Japanese political life is now extremely excited by a snap election called by the new Prime Minister, Takaichi Sanai. And it's looking to revive itself on the basis of standing up to China and also being a power of its own, no longer reluctant about investing overseas and investing at home. Let me get this off to Lance. There we go. Please join. I'm a rookie at this, that is, so I'm just there. I'm going to say Lance Gatling joins from Tokyo. He's a principal at Nexial Research, chiefly an investment counselor. He has the Japanese. He's married into a Japanese family, and of interest, I mentioned this is the Gatling family of 19th century fame. But Japan is something that has been a constant puzzlement for many years because of the question of whether it is going to stand up to the Chinese aggression. You have an opinion of the Japanese stance, the militarized stance to augment its self-defense force against China. I don't know that we've ever discussed it specifically.
No, but I think it makes sense. It makes sense in the geostrategic context that they're going to want to increase their ability to defend themselves, to project their economic power. And I don't know that the U.S. should certainly be worried about it at present, but we should keep an eye on it given the past history, not only of ourselves and Japan, but also between China and Japan. As you recall, John, better than anybody, what happened prior to the U.S. involvement in World War II was a particularly brutal and horrific occupation of China by Japan. And so there is always history between those two countries that is going to factor into their relations. So I think it is worth keeping an eye on, but I don't know that necessarily for our strategic goals of the present, with the U.S. looking towards the Pacific and a bit of away from Europe, that this is a certainly not a detrimental development, but it is one to watch.
It's a puzzlement, too, as to what the stance is by the national security document that we just had. It's not clear to me that the opposing of China is a priority to the Trump administration. Do you discern whether that is consistent or not? Or because Mr. Trump's scheduled to meet with Xi Jinping 4 times this year, they suspended the tariff trade, I believe, earlier in 25 and gave it a year off. How do you measure the Trump administration's opinion of the plain unacceptable conduct of the Chinese government?
I think to a certain extent, and a lot of what President Trump does is very similar in some ways to how another New York president dealt with things. And I'm not talking about Grover Cleveland. I'm talking about Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt was less ideological, and he was far more practical. And I think President Trump is very willing to do many of the things that Franklin Roosevelt did. He'll try a lot of different things, and if it doesn't work, he'll try something else. So when we're dealing with China, I think he does recognize that it is a problem. I think he recognizes it as a strategic enemy and rival model of governance. But the question is, how do you deal with them? Do you deal with them on a multiplicity of fronts, which I think he's trying to do? But if it's something he doesn't feel isn't working, he's going to try something else. So I think it's very difficult to say that he's got one set policy and it's going to go like this, and we're going to go through it, become thick or thin. So I think that that's kind of where we're at, and it can be very frustrating, especially to people who do public policy for a living, that they expect more of a straightforward, more linear approach, and that's not what we're getting.
We go right to Tokyo. We're joined by Lance Gatling. Lance, it's a great pleasure to introduce you to my dear friend Thadeus McCotter. And Thadeus, I introduce you to Lance Gatling in Tokyo.
Hello, Lance.
Gentlemen, we're going to begin. Let me hear your sound, Lance, before I start recording. Count to 5 for me, please. Nope, you're muted. You might click on your mute. I didn't think I was hearing you. It's on the lower left. There'll be a little microphone. He's going to get it. This is the making of the John Batchelor Show. Here he is. I'm hearing the sound now. Come in, Lance.
I hear you fine.
Oh, good. Well, in any event, we're going to begin right away. I'm going to push the record button. This is Lance, Thadeus, this is Lance's first time on the making of the John Batchelor Show. Who needed to do this, Lance? But it was too easy to just do Zoom all the time. So I thought it would be fun and entertaining to live stream while we're...
Producing your own show is not enough, right?
Right. And there are a lot of buttons to push. And so far, I haven't pushed the wrong one this morning. But I was a little...
I have managed to green screen myself, and I don't know how to ungreen screen myself. But anyway, how do I look?
A disembodied head, man. It's really very futuristic.
You look like you're well into your day in Tokyo. Tokyo's 12 or 13 hours from New York. Well, I know.
14 ahead of you.
All right. We're going to begin with the news, the political news on the snap election. What that means. Was it a surprise to the public? And then the question of, I sent you both this morning the headline from the FT about Japanese bonds and what that means for the general, the understood to be revived economy of Japan. Here we go. Thank you. 5, 4, 3. Let me get my FT headline up. Where is it? All right, I've got it here. 3, 2, 1. I'm John Batchelor, and Thadeus McCotter of American Greatness, my colleague and co-host, and we're pushing a button and going immediately to Tokyo, to my longtime informant in Tokyo, Lance Gatling, a principal of Nexio Research. There is exciting political news in Tokyo. A prime minister, recently a prime minister, who can play the drums. In addition to that, the first female prime minister in Japan's history, to my knowledge. In addition to that, someone who's from the school of Abe, meaning the determined national security side of the debate in the Japanese assembly, and now a snap election. All of this I bring to you, Lance, because we need help. Takaichi can play the drums. A very impressive demonstration with the president of South Korea. But the snap election, why call it when you have a control of the apparatus now? What do you gain from it? Good day to you, Lance.
Good morning, gentlemen. I hope you're not too cold there. It's nice here. It's crisp, but nothing like Detroit. Trust me. Takaichi-san herself is quite articulate, and what she said in an extended press conference was that she was made the prime minister by an internal mechanism within the party. She won the popularity contest for the leadership after Prime Minister Ishiba was threatened with a vote of no confidence, and he said he would not stand again. So the leadership was up for grabs, and she had a clear victory, but within the LDP. She became the leader of the president of the LDP, and then they proposed her as the prime minister, and as did the minority when Ishiba stood. Remember, we talked about this at some length. Actually, a number of representatives either failed to vote or intentionally spoiled their votes, voting for their own candidate or their own faction leader who was not even running at the time. So that was an intentional spoiled vote. So was elected in a minority government in that sense. So she inherited the mantle of leadership, and certainly had some horse trading to get that done. But she wants to be essentially confirmed by the Japanese people. She wants to give the Japanese people time to vote for her policies. Right now, the LDP is in a coalition government. They have 233. They have a one vote majority in the lower house, which is the more important of the two houses, particularly for the issues like finance and budgets and everything else. So with this bare majority, which most of the politicians, trust me, were willing to ride for a very long time, she wants to make some moves. She's not been exactly clear on what all that means. Some things that she's done are very populist in outlook. She wants to eliminate the 8% food tax over the next 2 years, which leaves a large hole in the deficit, since the Japanese eat like birds. They eat all the time, and they spend a lot of money on food, and that 8% is going to have to be made up someplace else. Also, in the Japanese system, they have a regular supplemental budget that started, I guess, many decades ago as an irregular supplemental budget. But the budget is passed, and you bear in mind that for the fiscal year that starts in 1st of April of 2026 has already been hammered out for 9 months. So lots of things can change in 9 months. The threat represented by various neighbors in Asia, for that matter. Technology can advance and need something. You could have pandemics that strike the country. So they have a supplemental budget that modifies the previous budget that is supposed to go into effect. And she has plans for that budget. She wants to make, in that way and others, she wants to make Japan a normal country. And this sounds very odd, I think, to casual observers of Japan. But when I first came to Japan, that was kind of a watchword. We want to make Japan a normal country. What is that? That would mean a country that has a military force, not a self-defense force, not a heavily armed civil service like they have now, but actually a military governed by military law, perhaps. a more well-rounded military capability, a populace, an electorate that discusses these hard issues that Japan faces, which include a declining population, and as you noted, Japanese government bonds, which are sold to fill that gap, just exactly that sort of gap. But this gap in the income stream of the Japanese government will be filled by Japanese government bonds. Those long-term bonds have gone over 4.2% for the first time in history since they started selling the things. And that's the market betting that her moves may be offset by growth, but it also has some risk of increasing load on the Japanese debt, which is currently around 220 to 260% of GDP, the highest in the advanced world.
Thank you. Thank you. Thaddeus, you have a question for Lance.
So the 8% reduction of the 8% food tax or the elimination of it sounds like a great sweetener to put forward perhaps some of her less salubrious solutions for the Japanese people. In short, is she using the 8% elimination of the 8% food tax to try to drive the normalization of the military, some of the geostrategic concerns along with it?
You sound like some of the opposition forces at loose in Japan. That she personally has a very high approval rating. As the prime minister, throughout the electorate, she has around a 75% approval rating. Amongst young people, she has over 85% approval rating, which is astonishingly high, particularly given that the LDP overall is still poking around 50%. So they have to have a good showing in the in this snap election, or she's going to resign. She will resign going in. Okay, she's already said on the 23rd they're going to convene the Diet, which is their parliament, the lower house, convene the Diet, and she's going to call for the snap elections on February the 3rd, which is a very short period of time for the new opposition party formed from the previous Liberal Democratic Party minor coalition partner for 26 years. They had a schism over some funding scandals that involved the Japan branch of the Unification Church. And that sort of publicity has not gone well with the Japanese public. So the question is she trying to do something that's purely egotistical, or is it a policy move to make a solid base in the parliament, in the Diet, from where she can effectuate these long-term policy goals of hers, which, as John mentions, stem from her relationship with the former Prime Minister Abe.
National defense, Lance. Let's focus. We have other headlines in London. It turns out to be this is the debate. And the way that London puts it is tensions likely between new government and the Bank of Japan. A successful snap election, goes to subhead, would strengthen Takeichi Sanai's mandate for increased government spending. And I believe that government spending is going into the military, no more self-defense force, a sizable increase in naval units and air units because of the continued belligerence of Beijing. Do I say all that correctly?
Almost entirely correctly, except that the increase in the defense spending, and this started with Prime Minister Abe. You might recall we discussed, and Ishiba, who is also a sort of a national security acolyte of Prime Minister Abe, followed through on this and actually accelerated. Prime Minister Abe promised that he was going to double the defense budget of Japan, which makes it one of the most substantial ones on the planet. The question is, how do they pay for it? which is why one of the reasons for the bonds. But also in her latest statements, Takaichi, Prime Minister, has said that she also is going to alleviate some of the pressures on the lower income people and the middle income people regarding long-term medical care, catastrophic medical insurance, food, everything else. When we first started talking about Japan, I mentioned that the inflation was not showing up on the shelves of the convenience stores where everybody buys their lunch, or the supermarkets, but it has caught up in a vengeance now. Inflation has hit foodstuffs. The government has recently announced that copay for Japan's excellent but largely socialistic and leavened out medical system, the copay has gone up to 30% versus the previous 10%. So in many ways, the Japanese government is also going back to the till to take out monies to support people. They've already enacted in the Heisei 7 budget, the current 2025 budget, that there's money in there for subsidizing electric bills, reducing gasoline taxes, reducing road taxes, things like that, populist moves. So she's trying to have perhaps her cake and eat it too. And the Bank of Japan, along with much of Wall Street and the Japanese financial institutes, in anticipation that that's going to increase pressure on the Japanese government to print more money, has sent the yen into a drop. It's down. It got to 160 yen to the dollar the other day for the first time in many, many years. And so bond prices are going down, yields going up, and the yen's going down. Thank you very much. I get most of my pay in dollars.
Lance Gatling is in Tokyo for Nexial Research. That is McCotter of American Greatness in Detroit. When we come back, China and its presentation, not only in trade, but in military aggression, bellicosity, threats. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with my colleague and co-host Thadeus McCotter of American Greatness, and we're on with Lance Gatling, my informant from Tokyo, when we've been discussing Japanese politics, all very exciting with a drummer for prime minister. However, the question about China's aggression is implicit in many of the decisions made throughout East Asia, not the least to do with Japan. What I need to understand, Lance, is your opinion now of China's aggression towards Taiwan. Is it muting in some fashion? Is it backing off? And the threats against Japan, are they effective? Are they seen as heard very carefully by the public, or do they shrug them off?
The most recent confrontation between China and Japan was occasioned by the new prime minister, Takaichi Sanae, in her first official diet function after being sworn in.
Right.
And the new government stood up, her cabinet presented, and it was actually in a budget meeting in the lower house. It was one of the most important committees in Japan, because there is where the ruling government and the opposition parties come to agreements regarding the massive Japanese government spending. And in the elaborate kabuki that is Japanese government politics, the question was transmitted to the bureaucracy, which prepped Prime Minister Takaichi to answer the question. And she knew that the question was regarding Japan's policy vis-a-vis China in the event it attacked Taiwan. She knew that was coming in not exact detail, but she knew pretty much that there was a fastball coming right down the alley towards her. And she was prepped to say, we don't discuss what ifs here. We only discuss what happens when it happens. Don't bring these to me. But she went a step further and said that sort of situation could involve it could involve a threat to Japan's existence, an existential threat. And that was the first time a prime minister had said that, even though the law that upon which that was based was very clear, and everybody knew she would answer that. She went half a step farther, or did she? Was it an accident, or was it on purpose? The Chinese made a big deal out of it. The Japanese opposition parties tried to make a big deal out of it. It blew up in their faces. The Japanese are very concerned about Chinese aggression against Taiwan. They have a long history with Taiwan. Everyone must realize that Taiwan was actually a part of Japan since 1895, 50 years. And even today, when I go to Taiwan, I can find old people who are educated and speak Japanese better than I certainly would have if I had not lived here for 40 years. So 50 years of Japanese rule and close. So Taiwan is actually sort of a hybrid culture between China and Japan. They feel a very close affinity to Taiwan. And they also feel, rightfully or wrongfully, they feel that they're also highly vulnerable to being interdicted on the open sea or the South China Sea. So yes, they watch that very closely, but as she says, we are ready to talk to China at any time. So they're always open.
Thaddeus, you have a question for Lance about China?
Yeah. Well, Lance, about Japan in particular, what are the odds of the snap election working out in the favor of the prime minister?
I haven't looked at the odds makers. I have friends who actually bet on such things. So perhaps we should get offline and take a look. I have a friend who claims that his best bud has quit his regular job and does nothing but bet on elections. She has really rolled the dice here, and she seems to be somewhat by herself. The question certainly is, can she maintain? Can she pull this off? They have to match their 233, which is a bare margin, bare majority, but they can't really get what she claims she wants to do done with such a small majority. They're going to have to gain 5 to 15 seats to get a clear majority to allow for people being sick or defectors or whatever, to make some big changes. And as their coalition partners in the Ishinkai, the minority coalition partners have pointed out, they spent all their time working on this supplemental budget that's going to change a lot of things. And if that goes away, then it's going to be very difficult to engineer that, do the political horse trading to get such a budget. So it will take a major hit to her, probably first to national security. And then the question is, what else? The deficit spending, tax cuts have a way of taking on a life of their own. Once she takes that 8% away from Japanese foodstuffs, there are going to be a lot of people that want that to stay away. The producers, the retailers, and the consumers of Japanese food, which is a great place to eat here. Trust me, gentlemen.
Lance Gatling of Nexial Research in Tokyo, facing a snap election, which can be determinative of the U.S. relations to East Asia. Thadeus McCotter of American Greatness. He is in the great state of Michigan and the suburb of Detroit. And I'm John Batchelor. There, thank you, Lance. This is the making of the John Batchelor Show. So, welcome. The making of the John Batchelor Show in Tokyo.
Sounds more like a snack election. 8%.
A snack election. There you go.
Kind of.
Well, it's going to be interesting. I think she has a 50-50 chance of pulling it off. I'm not sure many other people will do.
She gets really good media here. She's getting a great presentation.
Well, drummers usually get all the credit. The guitar players get nothing. Yeah.
Well, the more liberal wing of the loyal opposition, of course, hate her because she really seems to be enjoying herself, which is which is rule number one: thy enemy shall not enjoy themselves while they destroy you. I mean, that's just simply too much.
Lance, she sounds a lot of the agenda with the tax cuts, the military buildup, the personable nature of how she governs. Sounds a lot like Reagan.
She doesn't. I don't think she has a depth as such, but certainly she could develop into that. She likes the camera. She looks very good on camera. Her meeting with Maloney was beautiful. Of course, Italy and the UK are partners with the Japanese to build one of the most expensive fighter programs in history. But now Maloney said we're going to build a new strategic relationship between Italy and Japan. What's more surprising to me is how warmly she seems to get along with the president of South Korea, President Lee. If you ask John's colleague and our good friend, Gordon Chang, he's quite concerned about President Lee. But no matter what he's doing domestically, internationally, he has made some very interesting moves with the Japanese. And I think that they have a great opportunity here, if they do cooperate, in order to take advantage of the onshoring and the reshoring of particularly of semiconductors from China and Taiwan. And this is a technology and supply chain in which the South Koreans and the Japanese completely excel. They still control entire links in the chain, which people don't realize how important they are in that entire process.
Quickly, Lance, we just have a few minutes. Thadeus and I were just reporting on Germany revived spirits because of government spending on military matters, weapon systems, long-term, short-term, and also recruiting. The intentionality of Takeichi to spend on the military, is that seen as a positive in the Japanese markets?
It is a positive. The difficulty in investing in Japanese aerospace and defense manufacturers is that the companies that are the beneficiaries of this increased spending are not really heavy aerospace and defense players. For example, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries is typically the Japan, the head of the Japan team. If you would imagine them to be the Lockheed Martin of Japan, they build heavy industry type fighters, ships, submarines, things like that. But it's still a relatively small amount of their overall revenue, at 15, 16, 18% of their total annual turnover. And then the other companies that fill in the Fujitsus, the Mitsubishi Electrics, or whatever, is often single digits. So even if they double their defense build, it's not a huge bonus to the rest of the company. These are huge, diversified enterprises, typically not single plays. At the second and third tier, you might find some small companies that would benefit from those. In Japan, the old joke was Sensha wa Sensha desu. The tank is 1,000 companies. There were 1,000 small companies, small, medium enterprises involved in building 15, 16 tanks a year in Japan. Well, the joke was there's actually 1,500 companies. And some of them live and die by those, the track blocks or whatever they're making for those tanks. But typically those aren't on the stock market, or they're wholly owned subsidiaries of some other company. So it's difficult to find a pure play. And trust me, I get asked a lot by people who want to put that money down. A lot of that money is going to be spent in the United States, Raytheon, for missiles, Lockheed Martin. In a very interesting move, Palmer Luckey was here in Japan and rolled out Anduril Japan. He wants to build military equipment with a Japanese subsidiary of his U.S. company to build military equipment for the United States and Japan in Japan. That is, as far as I know, unique in history. And I've been doing this for a very long time.
Lance, I'm going to thank you this morning. We're going to end our show. Thadeus McCotter of American Greatness. Thank you, Thadeus. We look for everyone to join us the rest of the week. There's lots going on. Good heavens, we can pick any, throw the dart and hit whatever you want. Gentlemen, thank you very much. This is John Batchelor signing off from Beta. My life is Beta. Thank you all.
Bye, gents.
Bye, Lance.